coming to you live from the Bluff City. Conversations is weekly wall-to-wall talk about all things Memphis and the Mid-South. Conversations with Betty include people just like you, living on the Bluff, doing what you do to uplift the city of Memphis. And now, your host, Betty LaMarr.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in. This is Conversations 901, and I'm Betty LaMarr, and you know my wonderful co-host is LaCresha. And today we're going to sort of change things around a little bit. LaCresha says she's received so many emails and all kinds of, who is Betty LaMarr? We want to know about Betty LaMarr. So I'm going to toss it over to her, and so she can answer some of your questions. How about that?
First of all, I am honored to interview this wonderful lady. She has done so much for the city of Memphis. She's known all over, and I'm very proud to be in her life. It's been a wonderful journey since we met. She's seen potential in me, and I'm just happy that she is a part of my life.
Well, I was born in Sardis, Mississippi, on a dairy farm.
Okay.
I'm one of those girls that when I look at the movie The Help, I was that girl.
You resonate with that.
Yeah, I was that girl.
Okay.
I was definitely The Help, and that's where everything started.
So is that where, because I noticed that you have great work ethic, and that's one thing that I admire about you. It's not in one specific genre as far as work ethic. You can do it all. And so I would like to start with, I know you've had migrated to Memphis. Mm-hmm. And when you guys moved to Memphis, what was one of the first things you decided to do when you moved to Memphis?
Okay, well, I'm going to take it back just a little bit.
Okay.
To get us to Memphis. A lot of people ask me, like when you asked earlier about broadcasting. Mm-hmm. When I was a little girl in Mississippi, mm-hmm. My grandmother had a radio, because mm-hmm. back then in the 50s, you know, we had a radio. And honestly, my grandmother was what they said back then, favored by white people. Mm-hmm. They was always real good to my grandmother, my great-grandmother. And I lived growing up with my great-grandmother because we had just a bond,
right.
Like a mother. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I was favored, too.
Okay.
So I wasn't one of the little girls that had to go out to the field. I went in the big house, the
right.
help. Okay, I was in the help. I was one of the help. So, anyway, I remember, LaCresha, my grandmother would only turn this radio on Sunday.
Okay.
And I couldn't wait for Sunday morning because I just wanted to hear the radio. Mm-hmm. But I knew when I was just a little girl, probably your daughter's age, that I would be a voice in the box.
Okay.
One day.
Is that where you began to start dreaming about?
Having a vision.
Yes.
Didn't know what the voice, all I knew there was this voice coming out of this box.
Right.
Didn't know it was a radio. I knew I was going to be that voice in the box. Mm-hmm. Didn't know how, especially in Mississippi in the 50s, we wasn't, expected to have not even a box.
Right.
But she was favored, so she had a box.
Okay.
So that's when everything started. So there was this lady on the farm that in the big house, we mm-hmm. called it, Mrs. West.
Okay.
We worked on their farm because that's how it was back then.
Okay.
You worked on somebody's land. And for some reason, her name was Mrs. West. Her husband owned the Bank of Sardis. And they were considered wealthy, plus they had the dairy farm. And I remember she had these beautiful antiques and just surrounded by opulence, right? Never thinking that I would have that. But for some reason, she did. And I'm saying this because it's so important that people speak positive things over your life. And equally important is that you believe it.
I agree.
So I remember, I used to polish her silverware, the chandeliers, and I couldn't wait to touch that Duncan Fife and all that beautiful stuff. So, and I think she saw that in me. So one day, I'll never forget, LaCresha, she said, Betty, when you get big, you're going to have more beautiful things than I ever had. And you can have a bigger house, bigger everything. And as a kid in Mississippi now working for them,
Right.
the help, I never could imagine. But my first thought was, wow, she must really see something in me. Because in Mississippi, for a white lady that I'm working for, and
Right.
emptying their little spit tomb, as they call it then, the husband, the bank, all he did was,
To mention that and to speak that into existence for you.
and yeah, and I was like, okay, if she said it, I believe it.
Right.
Because I was just that young to
Right.
believe it.
But
Because nobody
also,
else was saying it.
that will also open your mind to start dreaming and to believe in those things. Like, okay, this is possible for me.
This is
Like,
possible. And later in life, before she passed away, we went back down to Sardis. And of course, we went to check on Mrs. West because Mr. West had passed by then, and my great grandmother had passed too. And it was amazing. What she said was true. Because when I was a little girl, I had to stand on the dining room table to, dust the chandeliers and stuff. And that stuff was like touching the top of my head. And I'm like, wow, she's right. Because my
Right.
ceilings at home are higher than hers.
Right.
So everything that she spoke over me. And anytime I've gotten in a position to where, we all go through those moments, her voice would always come to me. You can be anything you want to be.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. And I truly believe when you have someone to encourage you like that, to even just plant that seed in you,
Yes.
to make you start wondering, okay, is this possible? Can I do this? I think it just opens that door of possibility. And, we live in a world where you can honestly do anything you set your mind to.
Yes, and it's so important. And I say this to people and to anyone that's a parent out there listening. You can speak, even though the good book says that life and death is in the power of the tongue.
Right.
So whatever you speak, like I don't like to hear people say their child is bad.
Oh,
they may just be active.
I agree
But
with
you're
that.
speaking that.
Yes.
You're saying to this child, you are
bad,
bad.
right.
So now we see them on the news at 10.
I agree.
But you've been telling them they were bad since they was 2 years old.
Exactly. And I agree. Just positive energy, just giving that out to the world. I think we don't have enough of that. And I think that's why we are in a position here in Memphis and pretty much all over the country where there's so much gun violence, robbery and crime. So I just really think there's not enough positive role models and positive feedback to give to the children anymore. But that's another topic, another conversation for another day.
Get into that another time. That's a whole. That's an entire show.
I want to focus on you, Miss Betty, and
I always take it away from you.
Yeah, no, it's okay because there's so much to talk about. That's why we have conversations.
Well, I think you said I'm shy in a way. So to me, it's always, I always say whoever's sitting next to me is the star.
But
that's me.
I only think you're shy because you're kind of a quiet soul, but when you get in front of these cameras, it's a different subject. So,
okay.
But obviously, you did migrate to Memphis, and you did get into broadcasting, but broadcasting isn't the only thing that you've done. I do know by talking to you that you decided to join the military, and that has been very intriguing to me because I just don't see you as that woman in those boots. You're such a graceful lady, so to see you, to just envision you in some boots and military clothes, it's just very far-fetched for me. So I would love to hear that story of how you decided to join the military and what opened those doors up to you even considering going to the military.
Okay. My uncle was killed in Vietnam. He was like my favorite uncle when I was a little girl. And so I think because of that, instead of us running from it, we sort of became a family of service members, brothers, sisters, uncles. In my family, you go to college, you didn't lay around the house. There was no such thing as like these kids now still staying in mama's house for life.
Right.
when you graduated from high school, you had two choices, three really: college, get a job,
Right.
military.
Right.
So I wanted to leave Westwood. We can get into that too for obvious reasons, but to me, that was my out. I knew I didn't want to go to college.
Okay.
There was just something in me that knew whatever I wanted to do, I can do. Like Steve Harvey.
Absolutely.
Without that, I just always believed that, because Miss West said I could do anything.
Absolutely.
So I thought I didn't have to go to college. So I knew my parents were not the type that's going to let any of us just lay around and do nothing. So I went to the military, and I think it was great because my parents instilled discipline in us anyway. So the military just put the nail in it.
Right.
Okay, so that's one of the reasons I went to military, and I'm happy that I did.
Okay.
I wish everybody had, the whole United States of America had the health care
Absolutely.
that I'm afforded because I'm a veteran. I think everybody should have it.
I hear great things about the VA.
Yeah.
I do.
Well, I've been going there since 1976.
Wow.
So that is why, and I am a proud United States Army veteran. My uncle was in the Army.
And thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
And your family.
Yeah, we deserve it. 1% of the people, of the population serve.
Right.
Which meant we volunteer to go over, to fight, to do whatever has to be done for the freedom of all.
Right.
So for that reason alone, we deserve at least to be able to go to the doctor.
Okay. Absolutely. I absolutely agree because, it's so expensive nowadays to just be able to afford health care.
Period.
Period.
Which is totally crazy, but that's another talk show, right?
Absolutely it is.
Everybody should have it.
So I would love to hear about you living in Westwood. 'Cause is that the first place that your family stayed when you guys came to Memphis?
No, because we moved to Memphis when I was like 4 years old. We moved to Westwood, I think I was in junior high school.
Okay.
But this may sound really crazy, but living on the farm, being the help, living on, as we say, living on white folks' land, we were very blessed. Like Oprah said, her grandmother told her, when you grow up, I just want you to work for some good white folks, because everybody wasn't treated well.
I agree.
That's just reality.
Yeah.
There's no need of lying like it is. But we were blessed. So when I got to Memphis, when we moved, finally, my daddy finally got us in a house with 4 bedrooms, because there's 8 of us, 4 girls, 4 boys, and my mom and dad and grandmother. Sharing 2 bedrooms most of the time. But he never wanted us in an apartment, so we never went on a project. So finally, we had Mary Dick Hackett, and they decided to develop Westwood, to try to integrate Westwood. Now, we didn't know that we was integrating. We were kids. We just knew we was going to have 4 bedrooms, so we could finally get off top of each other.
And that probably felt like a mansion to you guys.
Was.
Absolutely.
But the first day we went to Westwood, they talk about that Arkansas situation, Brown v. whatever. When we went to Westwood, and I guess there's another reason why I went to the Army. I was ready to get out of there. But when we went to Westwood, kids then, you did what you were told.
Right.
We didn't make the rules. We just abide by them. That's the discipline. The first day we walked in Westwood, we had to fight. I didn't deal with that in Mississippi. We had to fight to go to school there.
Really?
And we didn't understand because all we were just black. But now remember, I wasn't raised to see myself as a color.
Right.
Things in Mississippi were just the way they were.
And see, for me, when I think of Mississippi, I think of really all-time high racism. And for you to say that you came to Memphis.
I hit it in Memphis.
And to experience that is...
Helicopters flying over the school. I mean, it was hard for us to even learn because everybody was in the hallways fighting. And we didn't understand why we were fighting because we wasn't raised.
Right.
I asked my daddy. I said, Daddy, heard these kitchen table conversations. I said, Daddy, why didn't you ever sit down with us and, and talk to us
Prepare us for this.
You know what he said? I never want my children to hate anyone that haven't done anything to them.
Right.
And I thank him for that, because I have white friends where maybe I would not now have white friends had I been raised in prejudice.
So he allowed you to have an open mind.
Yes.
And for you to make your own judgments on how you were being treated.
Yes, all of us.
Okay.
Because when my sister brought her first white boyfriend home, they didn't say anything right. And that's what piqued my interest. That's when I asked my daddy.
Right.
But Westwood was really, going back there, it was really horrible because we were trying to learn.
Was it predominantly black?
It was
or
white
was
school.
Just a white school?
And we, in Hackett, because of wanting, and I thank him, because my parents was blessed with a house built off the ground. But we didn't know that we were getting ready to go into a beehive.
Right.
We just knew it was first day of school. And this happened every day. In school, after school, police at school. So that was my experience with Westwood. And I couldn't understand. In Mississippi was when I would have expected
Right. And that's
to
how
deal
I feel.
with that.
Yeah.
And we did not. So I never liked Westwood. To this day, my dad still lives in the house. And I always tell Daddy, he said, he always, when you leave here, say, come back now. That's that little old stuff they do. I said, as long as you live,
Right.
I'll come back.
You'll be here.
But when you're gone, if you leave this world before I do, that's the end of me in Westwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't really have any good memories of Westwood. But after Westwood, things went, of course, as you know, in some really positive directions.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to, so with broadcasting, was this something that you decided to go engulf yourself in before the military?
It all goes back to knowing, coming into this world, knowing that I was going to be the voice in the box.
Right.
Before there was a box. Like they say, if there's any such thing as past life, that's who I was.
Right.
I just had to come back into being. So after I did the military, I came back home. I immediately got a job because remember, that's the discipline. My mom and dad worked 2 and 3 jobs, so we wouldn't have to ask nobody for anything.
Right.
Never had a day where we didn't know what we was going to eat. My mother was the type mother that fed the neighborhood. They knew when dinner time was.
That's
and somehow our little food stretched out to the kids that didn't have anything. So they worked hard. So we didn't know we was poor because we never went without.
Right.
We never woke up, lights wasn't on, anything like that, right? So I went, I guess, the broadcast came. I'm going to tell you what happened, going back to having that vision. This young lady asked me if I would model for her. She was going to be on Comcast. Back then it was Time Warner.
Because you do have those beautiful long legs.
And the clothes. So she said, would you model for me? I said, well, I don't do modeling because I'm shy and I'm not the type that want to be in an audience other than this setting because there's nobody out there but our professional camera operators, right? So I said, okay, but I'm not going to get on the runway. So don't ask me because I can't do that. I just can't do that. And so she said, okay, well, will you just model on this little TV show? All you gotta do is walk out and I'm gonna be talking about this fashion show that I'm doing with proceeds going to St. Jude. So that sort of motivated me too, it was for a cause.
Right.
So I said, okay, I wasn't even thinking about TV. I was thinking about doing this for her and hoping I didn't pass out and because
Kind of like how I started with you.
Yes, And so after the show was over, just a little 30-minute show, one of the producers came up to me, never heard my voice, didn't know nothing about me. They didn't ask her, they asked me, would you like to do your own TV show? Produce your own show? I'm like, She's the one
Really?
interviewed. I'm just a clothes hanger here,
Like,
right?
you sure you don't want to speak to her?
Yeah, but it goes back to that vision
Absolutely.
and believing it. So I didn't want to tell him I didn't know what a producer was. So I said, let me think about it. And we didn't have Google back then, so I went home and looked in the dictionary, producer. Okay. That's like someone giving you a blank canvas. Mm-hmm. And you put anything on it you want to put on it. Because you're producing this.
You're producing it.
So then I automatically fell back on, I have all these women around me. They love to model. I don't. But anybody I asked will model, right? So I can just throw that on the canvas. So then I said, well, but I don't have camera people and any of that. They had already set it
care
up.
of it.
So they said, oh, we already have some volunteers. They say if you would do your own show, they would volunteer to produce, be a camera operator, edit it. So I would sit in with them like 1 o'clock in the morning watching them edit my show so I could learn how to edit. It was like amazing. It's like, this is amazing.
A whole new world.
This is amazing. So, just seeing them put this story, my story together, and like, oh my God. So goes back to being the voice in the box because my family was the first one in our neighborhood to get a TV.
Wow.
So I knew when I saw the TV, at first it was the radio, the box. Mm-hmm. So when I first saw a TV in our house, like I said, we didn't know we was poor because my parents made sure
that you went without anything.
I had finally, when you had a Mattel toy, it was like
that's like the top brand.
Yeah. And there were 8 of us. So I said, if I'm going to get one thing, I want a movie projector. So in other words, it was already in me.
Right.
So I went down to Mississippi because I knew I had all kinds of stuff down there, right? And when I came back, my brother had played with my movie projector and broke it.
Oh no.
Yeah, so then the only thing I had was a viewfinder, but I was still looking at.
I remember those.
Yeah, so it was always in me that, the pictures, seeing pictures. And so one day he was sort of playing around in the base, over on the stairs over our basement. So I just sort of gave him a little push. Then, unfortunately he broke his arm, but it was like, you broke my movie projector. That meant a lot to me.
That meant a lot to
because
you.
that was a part of my dream.
Absolutely.
After that, I was blessed with Betty's Resell, my clothing store. So that took it to the next level. And then I was...
and you were still doing broadcasting while you
I had a stage in the store.
Right.
Yeah, I've always had to have a stage. So I had a stage in the store, so we was filming in the store. And supermodels like Kate Moss and all those people would come to the store because the Peabody had me on their list. So whenever entertainers were in Memphis and wanted to know where could we go, they'll call me and say, hey, Kate Moss, supermodel, is coming to your store. And then was Betty's. Then I did charity benefits for women and children with AIDS. Then that got me into the gay community, which was one of the most fun times of my life.
Right.
Engaging in the gay community. Because really, I tell people I bought my first Porsche because of the gay community supporting my business. Because back then, they didn't have anywhere to shop.
Yeah.
And when I found that out, I'm like, what? Because being a black person in Westwood and living with racism, being a black person, my thing is, how can I be prejudiced against anyone when I've lived in this skin, right? So I embraced them.
Right.
And they were like my customer base. And so I ended up doing benefits, fashion shows. Took the first gay show to Beale Street.
Wow.
They didn't know I was bringing them, but I didn't tell them.
And that's major. That is a transcendent thing for you to do, and you have to be very bold and know who you are to bring a change like that, especially in a city like Memphis. Because as you see, you said that you experienced racism here. So even during that time, we know that Martin Luther King Jr. got shot here. So it was high in racism. So for you to do that for the gay community,
yes,
and have such a big platform for them to be able to do so, I think that is something in itself to say about you. That's very bold. That's very brave. I'm very
and really the demise of the business. You know, I had also dancers.
Right.
So I was that person that would embrace the people that the hypocrites
right.
was against. So when Fredericks called me back then, we had Fredericks of Memphis, and I know I'm going over my time a little bit, but because some things I feel is important, but when Fredericks called me and said they was leaving, back then we had, I think, the Mall of Memphis, whatever, and they knew that I was already dressing the gay guys, the drag queens, so they wanted to know if they could send the dancers to Betty's. So, because they still needed high heel, those, you know, pre-internet with, you know, and I would fly to Las Vegas and Amsterdam and all over the world to get what they
original
needed.
Pieces, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what made Betty's an icon. So then I said, yeah, because other people didn't want to deal with them just because they were dancers. I didn't care.
Right. They're people.
They were people doing what they do. And you'll be amazed, LaCresha, most of those dancers were in college to be doctors. They was doing what they had to do as we do what we have to do to make it.
Right. And I truly believe you can't help who you're born to be. You know, you can't help that. And I think that's why I really don't like the prejudice of people just prejudging individuals
because you're gay, you're bad.
You're gay,
because you're Asian, you're bad.
Exactly.
Because you're black. We're all under the sun. We all, red blood runs through all of us. Okay? And it don't matter. When I see people. And if you have an aura, you know, I told you about I do auras.
You do.
So if you have an aura about you that tells me what you're about, I'm not going to judge you because of your color. I'm looking at your aura.
Absolutely.
Because your color don't make you a good or a bad person.
It doesn't.
But your aura will reveal.
I absolutely agree with that.
If I want to be in your company or not. Now I'm going to let you wrap it.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today with Conversations with Betty LaMarr and LaCresha Chisholm. We look forward to seeing you, and please follow us on YouTube, and you can watch any of our shows there. It's 901 Conversations for me, for LaCresha Chisholm and Betty LaMarr. You can also check her out as well. We look forward to seeing you guys. We love you so much, and stay tuned for our next show.
Thanks for listening to Conversations with Betty LaMarr. Visit our website, www.thebettylamarrshow.com. Email betty@thebettylamarrshow.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Betty LaMarr Memphis. We'll talk to you next week on Conversations with Betty LaMarr.